Hello, hi. Well, I see that imposter syndrome is once again in the headlines, and I thought I'd share some tips about imposter syndrome and dealing with it. It's not really like the big thing I talk about because I talk about fear of success, but what I find is that imposter syndrome is really like wrapped up in that. So I need to be able to understand and talk about imposter syndrome for anybody who's really trying to work through their fear of success. So, the number one thing that I'd like to tell you about imposter syndrome is so you probably know that it's when we feel like an imposter or a fraud when we're doing something. Often, when we're doing something that is really authentic success for us. But one of the most important things to remember before we start dealing with imposter syndrome is to check whether it really is imposter syndrome or not. And there has been kind of a backlash among a lot of people, particularly women and women of colour, because a lot of the time they're being told that they have imposter syndrome when really it's the environment. So it's the work environment, it's colleagues, it's managers, even potential employers. So we really have to stop and consider that, whether it's ourselves that are experiencing imposter syndrome or whether we think somebody else is, and really stop and think about that. Because when we're being treated as an outsider, or an imposter, a fraud, or just, as Shonda Rhimes would say, the first, the only, in a situation, it's not really imposter syndrome. It's actually being treated like an imposter. And it's bullying, it's discrimination, it's prejudice, all of those things. And so in those situations, it's really important to call it by its right name and not to pretend or to assume that it's imposter syndrome. And I think if that's the only thing I teach you about imposter syndrome, that is probably the biggest thing. Because it's not unusual, it's quite common, and to a certain extent natural for us to go through periods of imposter syndrome. And we can work through it, and sometimes we can even use it to our advantage. And I'll talk about that more in some other clips. But I thought that's probably enough for one day, just to focus on that and really question it. It's very common when we have these kind of buzzwords, even fear of success. We have these buzzwords and everybody's like talking about it, but really take a moment to think, is this really applicable to the situation you're looking at? Okay, take care, see you soon, bye-bye.